My name is Graham Shaw. I'm not Hannah Vokes because she's actually still in Kenya, but I thought I'd come along. My brief today is just give you a little bit of an idea of Kenya, opportunities in waste management, and just brief you as to why you should be coming to Kenya. We have just had a plastics ban in Kenya. It's quite a remarkable achievement. They put in amazing penalties, 4 years in prison and $30,000 fine if you're caught with plastic bags. And this is just a very amusing skit as to what happens when you don't have plastic bags in Kenya. This is a comedian who's based in Nairobi, and he suddenly realizes that whiskey cartons are replacing plastic bags. It's a very amusing character. Anyway, so let me just go on a little bit and just give you a brief about Kenya. It's a growing economy. It's massive. Its GDP is growing. It is the feeding country into the center of Africa. So I've got a friend here from Cameroon, so he's a little bit further west, but it feeds into Uganda, South Sudan. We're touching now with Ethiopia a lot. Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo. So it is a very strategic location. Sector opportunities, I think everyone knows Kenya for tourism. But please look at other aspects of it. Infrastructure is incredible. We've now got this enormous railway coming through, which has been built by the Chinese. The British and the Americans are now putting in a massive road project. So Kenya is generally increasing substantially, and it's worth considering. I mentioned I'm the chairman of the British Chamber, and that's also a mandate of mine, is to improve relations between Kenya and the UK. It's easier for me because I was born in Kenya, so I know it pretty well. I heard the previous speaker talking about quite a lot of aspects of relationships, and I'll come on to that in a second. The LAPSET project. This is driven by a 2030 vision, and Kenya is going to be the conduit of the Silk Road. They're putting a railway from Lamu all the way to the west coast into Cameroon. So there is a lot of activity going on in Kenya. Please don't underestimate what's happening there. Mombasa Port, it's amazing. Over the last 3 years, the British and the Japanese have invested considerable amount of money, and they're now transporting 1.5 million containers a year. That's almost double from 5 years ago. But we need the roads and the railways to ship the containers inland. So Kenya is a really good transit point. Let's move on to opportunities and risks. I think this is an area that people really want to know. Let me just go through them quickly. Our biggest issue, certainly within the aspect of the theme of today, is policy. We've banned plastic bags, and the ministry are now looking at ways of banning plastic bottles. Because in Kenya, I drive home every day, I can guarantee 2 or 3 cars will just hurl the bottle out the car. It'll just bounce down the road and everyone expects it. It's quite ridiculous. I'll show you some photos later. We've got to introduce training into attitudes. Guys, you throw it out, who's going to pick it up? But they really don't care at the moment. So it's an attitude and a policy focus. Collection and logistics. This is quite an important area, and I talk about it openly because there are cartels and corruption within the government, whereby they will appoint companies to do the collection, and they will pay them to do the collection, but they don't collect. So they're actually being paid to do very little. Disposal, there are 2 or 3 very interesting areas of disposal, but Nairobi itself is generating 2,000 tons of garbage a day, and most of it's not being collected. Although very recently we've had an election, we are still going through an election, but the governor of Nairobi has now actually implemented a collection process, because one of his election mandate was to clean up Nairobi. And he is doing it. And if we've got some time at the end, I'll show you a Facebook page. PPPs. The Italians and the French are very aggressively trying to work out what they can do with the garbage that's sitting around. we've got something like 2 million tons of garbage lying around on the outskirts of Nairobi. It is not being recycled. It's just lying there. So there is opportunity. So what are the risks? Partners, be careful. Be careful, because every person you meet in Nairobi, and I'm afraid in surrounding countries, they know everyone. That partner knows the president, he'll know everybody. And so does about 20 other people. So as chairman of the British Chamber, if you're coming to Kenya, we will certainly be able to help you filter out the guys that are trying to con you to the guys that can actually help you. So please be very careful with it. A couple of very big British companies have fallen foul of the middleman. Corruption and cartels. I'll give you a classic example of a cartel. We have Nairobi Airport is receiving about 100 airplanes a day. All the disposable stuff's coming off the airplanes into a line of trucks. It's all loaded into trucks. Those trucks have to be driven to the dumps with armed escort. Because there is so much value in those trucks. Unused food, plastics, trays, whatever you like to call it. They then get towards the dumps. They then have to pay cartels or mafia a fee to get through to the dumps. They then dump everything, and it's like a hornet's nest. Everyone comes in and just cleans everything out. So it's a challenge, and I'm not sure about the other countries, but it's quite a challenge. But it's big business in the informal sector. We've got to change it from the informal to a lot more policy related. Government and counties, we now have 47 counties, and I think Nairobi being the main hub and Mombasa, I think the governors are now beginning to be a little bit more focused on their own counties, because the filth there is pretty awful. Let me just talk about water and sanitation just for a minute. Severn Trent Water Authority came out to Kenya, and they reckon that we're only collecting about 40% of the harvesting of water. All the other 60% just disappears. People are not harvesting water from their roofs, they just let it go into the ground. But it's quite interesting. We're going through a major drought at the moment. I'm sure the bad press, we've been talking about farmers being attacked and goodness knows what else. The pressure on land in Kenya is growing, but it's coverable, it's manageable. And then the forest cover. We've only got 3% of the country is under forests. But there are some big initiatives where we're actually fencing off collection areas. I come back to infrastructure. It's all about policy and then implementation. And if you look at this sewage farm, that's been there since 1960, and it's only doubled in size since 1960. The population in Nairobi has grown from about 500,000 to 5 million, so you can see where we're actually a little bit behind. This is Nairobi Dam. It's in the center of Nairobi, and as a child I used to swim and water ski in it. It was clean, it was fed the water into Nairobi. That is in 1978, that is today. There is no water in there, that's just sewage. So we've really got to consider how we can control it. I want to just pick this picture in. I don't know if anyone heard about Ethiopia and the dumps in Ethiopia, and it was only last month that the mountain of garbage fell over and killed about 70 people. So Ethiopia, Kenya, we're generating too much garbage and we haven't got any scheme on how to sort it all out. But we're putting pressure on it because it's my pet hate at the moment. We talked about the recycling ban. I just want to raise a couple of opportunities. There's a company, a British company that's set up in Dubai, and what they're now doing is collecting from collection points a lot of, I've got HP here because I heard a conference yesterday, computers, handsets, etc., etc. So what they're now doing is they're stripping out all the metals and semi-important areas of a computer or a handset, and they're shipping it to Dubai and basically recycling it. What happens to the cases of all this, I've yet to find out, but at the moment we need to work on that. that is a picture from my car going home, and I don't know if anyone knows Nairobi, no one's put their hands up, but that is what you see the whole time. It's just thrown out the window. And we've got to start sorting this out, because with a growing population, it's going to get worse. And that is literally leaving just outside Nairobi. I don't want to talk about the British Chamber much. I think the British Chamber, most people know, but we're very focused. And in Kenya, we've now counted 212 British companies who are operating in Kenya. And I was the previous presenter, CK. They have just exported some recycling equipment to Kenya for the first time. We need more of you to do it. And I'm very happy to interface with anyone that sees it as an opportunity. I do. We've got to do something about it. It's a growing concern of mine. Kenya. I'm leaving you with this one before I go on to just showing you. SportsPesa is a Kenyan betting company that is now the main sponsor of Hull City Football Club. So if we got companies that are making that much money and are prepared to go and sponsor Hull City, there is a big opportunity. GDP is up at 6%. We've got free foreign exchange. It's very cosmopolitan country. Culture, we're English speaking. We're basically ex-colony, good and bad. But everything in Kenya is very receptive to people coming in to invest. The only area that I've got to highlight is corruption, but it's manageable if you know who you're working with. So that just gives you an insight on Kenya. I'm going to just give two videos, if you don't mind. It's got wording on it. This is India, where I went to recently. Let me just... Could you help me with the mouse, please? I went to India recently, and they have equally decided to ban plastic. And in Mumbai, I can see why. But it's just worth having a look at because of ideas. The reason I showed India is that if Kenya doesn't see what's happened there, we're going to be in a similar situation. So what I'm trying to do is to use the examples of problems outside. This is the new governor, and the new governor has just decided we are going to clean up this mess. Because the previous governor wasn't so effective. There is tons of this stuff just lying around because there's an attitude of just throw it. So he's now starting to literally gather all this garbage and relocate it to proper areas, but then what happens to it? We've got to consider it. So British companies have got a real opportunity here. I have to say, I mean, he's a very, very strong individual, and we need probably more of these people. So anyway, that just gives you an insight as to what opportunities there are there. It's a great country to live in. It's got fantastic wildlife. It's got a fantastic people. I'm born there. My kids are born there. I've got to go to Cameroon. I've got a Cameroonian African here as well, but he's never been to Kenya. But please do come across the East Coast. It's certainly worth having a look. But big opportunities. Please don't ignore us. Thank you very much indeed.